The Power of Six actors who Lee Van Cleef detested. The greatest Lee Van Cleef's father, Clarence Leroy Van Cleef Jr., came from Somerville, New Jersey, and he was born on January 9, 1925. His family had Dutch roots, and he was born into a working-class household. His humble beginnings betrayed the cinematic renown he would achieve in his later years. Following his high school graduation, he joined the United States Navy and served with honor throughout WWI, taking part in missions in the Pacific Theater aboard a minesweeper. A disciplined demeanor that he inherited from his time in the military came through strongly in his acting roles. In his civilian life, Van Cleef held a number of occupations after the war ended, including that of painter and accountant. Hollywood scouts noticed his electric stage presence in a local production, and that was the turning point in his career. In 1952's High Noon, he made his film debut as a silent wicked gunman. His remarkable appearance made an impression even though it was a little role without speaking. Van Cleef was anything but your average Hollywood star, all those pointed cheekbones, hawk-like nose and fierce stares, but it was also one of his strongest suits. He appeared in innumerable crime dramas and westerns as a supporting villain in the 50s and 60s. During this time he was most known for playing notable supporting roles, usually as henchmen, outlaws or cold assassins. Showcased in films such as The Big Combo 1955, Kansas City Confidential 1952, and The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance 1962, he could captivate an audience with little conversation. It appeared his acting career was ended after a near-fatal vehicle accident in 1958 left him with a crippled knee. Nevertheless, Van Cleef's career had a remarkable turnaround in the 1960s, which would cement his status as a cinematic icon. For a few more bucks in 1965, he was cast by Sergio Leone, an Italian director, opposite Clint Eastwood in the now iconic spaghetti western. Colonel Douglas Mortimer, portrayed by Van Cleef, was a dignified bounty hunter who sought vengeance. Both critics and fans were taken aback by his performance, which showcased a depth and charisma that had been underutilized in his previous parts. This was a watershed moment in his career, as leading men are unusual for performers who were traditionally cast in evil parts. He played the role of Angel Eyes, the heartless and cunning villain in Leon's famous Triangle, alongside Clint Eastwood in 1966's The Good, the Bad and the Ugly, reviving their on-screen connection. Van Cleef's international fame was solidified by the film's enormous success. Van Cleef wholeheartedly embraced the spaghetti western genre, unlike many actors who would have faded with the western's declining popularity. Afterwards, she starred in other westerns set in Europe during the 60s and 70s. Sabata 1969, Death Rides a Horse 1967, The Big Gun Down 1966, and Day of Anger 1967 were among these. He became even more famous for his mastery of moral ambiguity and stoic intensity in each role he played. Quiet authority characterized his on-screen demeanor. He spoke quietly, yet there was an aura of menace around him at all times. Characters played by Van Cleef were frequently calculated thinkers who were motivated by personal standards of justice, even when faced with ethically ambiguous situations, in contrast to other Western stars who depended on brazen heroism. The anti-hero archetype, which he personified, came to characterize the contemporary Western. Not only did he deliver stellar performances, but viewers admired the calm genuineness with which he inhabited his parts, which appeared to be influenced by his own personal struggles and experiences. During the 1980s, Van Cleef branched out into television and action-adventure films, broadening his acting repertoire. He played the tyrannical police commissioner Houck in the 1981 cult movie Escape from New York, and portrayed a retired ninja master in the 1984 NBC series The Master. These subsequent endeavors demonstrated his capacity to adapt to shifting tastes in the entertainment business, even though they were not all commercial successes. Many meaningful relationships occurred in Lee Van Cleef's personal life, and they all happened at different points in his rise to fame in Hollywood and beyond. He wed Patsy Ruth Cale for the first time in 1943, a union that started among the tumultuous years of W.E. Gary W. Fee. Interiukum tertu is a virtue out of WE1. Having just left the United States Navy to pursue a career in acting, Van Cleef was in the early stages of his profession. He began to make his mark in the profession with the support of Patsy Ruth, who became his loyal partner throughout these crucial years. They became parents to a boy, a daughter, and a third kid as a unit. Van Cleef's acting career was taking off, but he was also juggling the duties of parenthood and his young family. He frequently felt split between the two. The couple's relationship was eventually tested by the challenges that come with being in the public eye, despite their shared history and the years they spent together. When Lee and Patsy filed for a divorce in 1958, after being married for 15 years, it ended his first and longest-lasting marriage. Joan Marjorie Drain became Van Cleef's second wife 2 years after their divorce, in 1960. His acting career was in a whirlwind when Joan joined his life. He had been through the ups and downs of Hollywood, and he was still getting back on his feet after a devastating car crash in the 50s that almost destroyed his career. As he tried to get back on his feet in the business, Joan was there for him emotionally and gave company. During the 14 years of his marriage, Van Cleef had a career renaissance, mostly in Europe, where he became famous around the world as the star of spaghetti western classics like For a Few Dollars More and The Good, the Bad and the Ugly. With Joan by his side, he reached a degree of fame he had never experienced before. However, in 1974, the couple's marriage came to an end, just like his previous. The reasons behind their breakup are mostly unknown, although the constant demands of stardom, constant travel, and the high-stakes lifestyle of the entertainment industry probably had a part. Lee Van Cleef wed Barbara Havalone for the third and last time in 1976. Van Cleef had already been an international superstar by this point, and he was especially well liked in Europe, thanks to his distinctive appearance and powerful screen presence, which made him an unforgettable and frequently scary character in Hollywood films. Throughout addition to being his wife, Barbara was a rock for him throughout his twilight years of work and life. Throughout his latter years in the film industry, she was there for him, helping him overcome the many health problems that had plagued him since his childhood auto accident and his smoking habit. Barbara became the widow of a man whose famed performances ensure his legacy will remain after his death in 1989. From a long and fruitful marriage, she showed her passion and commitment by making an attempt to cherish his memory even after he passed away. Furthermore, admirers frequently think of her with affection because she was there for Van Cleef when his extraordinary life and career came to a close. As one of Hollywood's most iconic bad guys, Lee Van Cleef was known for his menacing gaze and commanding presence as a gunslinger. Not every relationship he had with one of Hollywood's biggest stars was amicable. Van Cleef was not one to take egos or idiots lying down. He was known for his no-nonsense professionalism and forthright demeanor. Reportedly, he had fights with other co-stars behind the scenes over things like creative differences, scorn and personality clashes. Supposedly, Lee Van Cleef hated the following 6 actors. The dynamic between John Wayne and Lee Van Cleef was fraught with difficulty. Despite their shared cinematic legacy, the two towering idols of the Western genre couldn't have been more different in terms of politics, professional respect, and personality. In contrast to Wayne's studio-backed, all-American cowboy ideal, Van Cleef built his reputation on gritty European-made spaghetti westerns that celebrated moral gray areas and realistic filmmaking. Van Cleef was an artisan who worked his way up the ladder from little parts like villains in unacknowledged roles. He despised Wayne's arrogant dominance of the genre, which he felt was aided by industry heavyweights like John Ford. Members of the team whose lots overlapped with Wayne's claimed that Van Cleef felt Wayne to be arrogant and condescending. particularly when it was said that the Duke called European westerns cheap cowboy flicks. That felt like a blow to Van Cleef, whose star rose in Sergio Leone's films for a few dollars more in The Good, the Bad and the Ugly. Despite the fact that they never worked together, rumors circulated that Van Cleef declined a supporting role in a John Wayne picture because he didn't want to be the studio's puppet. He shunned Wayne on red carpets and press tours and secretly called him Hollywood's mascot. Even though it was never publicly acknowledged, Western insiders knew about the competition. The Boating Alphas' War, Charles Bronson, Part 2. It was widely believed that Charles Bronson and Lee Van Cleef were very comparable actors. Both were fierce performers who could carry an entire picture with a scowl. According to rumors though, Van Cleef resented being constantly compared to Bronson and secretly hated him, especially during their peak European renown in the 1970s. The turning point may have occurred when Bronson landed the main role in Sergio Leone's epic Once Upon a Time in the West, which Van Cleef had shown interest in. Leone opted for Bronson for the starring role, despite his earlier preference for Van Cleef. It is said that Van Cleef interpreted this as a professional betrayal and began to doubt Leone's allegiance because of it. In subsequent interviews, Van Cleef gently criticized Bronson's stilted acting, quoting an old joke about how a block of granite could convey more emotion. The two allegedly had such intense hostility on set that producers purposefully staggered their shooting dates when they briefly met paths during overlapping shoots in Spain. Both actors were professional stoics, but Van Cleef, who had training in theater and method acting, took offense to Bronson's sudden ascent to stardom as proof that Hollywood valued style above substance. The third is Clint Eastwood, who went from protege to outcast. Among the most unexpected names here is Clint Eastwood, who catapulted Lee Van Cleef to stardom on a global scale. The Good, the Bad and the Ugly and For a Few Dollars More were two of their most famous joint works. However, there was a lot more tension between them off-camera than what showed on TV. Despite Van Cleef's admiration for Eastwood's ambition and level head in the beginning, the latter's meteoric rise to stardom in the 1970s left the former feeling forgotten. He felt that Eastwood had abandoned the directors and actors who had helped him advance through the